In response to the Lincoln movie, I wanted to tell you the truth about Lincoln, one that Hollywood liberals like Steven Spielberg never will. Here is the straight dope. Lincoln was not a great man, but a mass murderer and a dictator who killed more people than Hitler. How do we know this? Look at the numbers. It's estimated now that 750,000 people died in the American Civil War. Deaths that were all Lincoln's fault because he could have chosen to allow the South to succeed, as was their constitutional right. Instead, he chose to embark on a war in order to demonstrate to the states that the tyrannical federal government was top dog. If you take the three quarters of a million people and adjust it in proportion to present day population of the U.S., that is 7.55 million deaths, more than the 6 million Jews that Hitler killed. Lincoln undoubtedly is one of the greatest monsters the world has ever seen. And that is not all. Lincoln created the totalitarian dictatorship in which no dissent was allowed. In the Blue Coat Terror, habeas corpus was suspended, and threw countless of thousands of dissidents into jail. Anyone who innocently espoused the cause of keeping black people in chains risked a knock at the door in the middle of the night from the police. Brainwashed mobs waving the Emancipation Proclamation in their hands were harassed, beat, hounded, and even murdered anyone in the streets who didn't agree with the new revolutionary order. Under Lincoln, a grim system of prison camps was set up in which tens of thousands, by calculations explained above, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people died horrible deaths. Lincoln personally saw to it that every single one of these prisoners suffered, cackling like a maniac as he did it. Finally, Lincoln unleashed a terror famine on the people of the South, who were just innocently minding their own business, whipping, raping, and exploiting their own property in peace. According to Thomas D. Lorenzo, a completely objective historian from the Ludwig von Mises Institute, probably hundreds of thousands, read millions, of hapless white Southerners were deliberately starved to death by Lincoln's hatchet man, General Sherman, during the Great March to the Sea. In closing, Lincoln was an abomination and a blight to the history of this country, whose tenure brought only suffering, tyranny, death, and enslavement of white people to the government, that is. There was no reason whatsoever for such a disruptive and destructive change wrought on the country, a society in which was fine as peaches until 1861, only an opportunistic, cunning coup, falsely described as an election, in which the majority of voters did not vote for Lincoln. By Lincoln and a handful of hot-headed radical abolitionists created the monstrosities that followed. One can only be thankful that an uprising of patriots struck down the tyrant and that his reign of terror was brought to an end in that movie theater. But before long, things settled back into their rightful place for another century until subversives began stirring up the ignorant masses again who didn't know what was good for them. The reign of Chairman Lincoln is a horror that cannot be emulated or repeated ever again. Such an affront to private property and democracy can never be tolerated by free men. This would spell the end of Western civilization. And it makes me sick just thinking of the people who ran around supporting capitalism today are just giving mindless support to glorifying the psychotic monsters. Useful idiots, they're called.